Good morning, my friends. So we have come to the last day of working in our Elements of Art um, packet. I'm not a big packet person, but for this it worked out, I think, hopefully pretty well. Um, so we have come to this section on texture. So texture is a really fun element of art. It might be my favorite element of art. I'm not sure. I might like, it's either texture or color for sure for me. So texture is the way something looks like it feels if we are talking, if we are talking about visual texture. So in art, visual texture in a two-dimensional piece of artwork, so something like a drawing, is when you try and create the way something feels by drawing it. Actual texture or three-dimensional texture we would use in something like sculpture. So when we use clay, we might try and make our clay pinch pots smooth on the outside. So smooth is a texture. You might try and make your pinch pot bumpy or rough on the outside, like when we do the slipping and scoring. So when you rough up a part of it, you're creating a texture there too. So actual texture is three-dimensional. It sticks out into the world. It's like a real thing. Two-dimensional texture is something that we can create in art using line and shape and color and value and other like elements of art and principles of design. Value is a principle of design. We'll talk about those later. We have already done color, line, shape, and form. Now we have texture to do. That is our last element of art. So we are going to flip not completely to the back page, but like the second to last page. It's a page that says texture at the top. You will want to have a pencil with you, and for later on you'll want to have some crayons and another piece of paper. I'll talk more about that later though. Okie dokie. So texture is the way something feels when you touch it. Bumpy, rough, smooth, hairy. Those are all words that would describe the way something feels when you touch it. So visual texture is different than actual texture. Visual texture is the way something looks like it feels. So actual texture is three-dimensional. So when I touch my little piece of paper here, it actually feels rough. If I were to draw this texture and feel it, it would be flat. It would not actually feel rough. Just to my eyes, I could imagine that it would feel rough. So actual texture is three-dimensional. Visual texture is two-dimensional. So two-dimensional is flat, three-dimensional is fat. So that means it like actually sticks out into the world. So this paper was just a looking at piece of paper. So now we are going to flip over. So actual texture is going to go on this side. Visual texture will go on this side. So you're going to name an object or animal with an interesting actual texture. And then over here, you're going to use a pencil and you are going to draw what that texture would look like. So just real quick, if you're having a hard time coming up with ideas for things that have an interesting texture that you could draw, I would suggest things from nature. So something like a leaf. Something like the bark of a tree, something like a rock. Rocks are interesting though because they could be smooth, they could be rough. Rocks have lots of different textures. So you would have to kind of think about the type of rock that you were drawing. Are you drawing like a nice rock from the beach, or are you drawing a rock that you like found out in the woods, right? Those would have two like very kind of different textures to them. You could also just kind of like, you know, when I did mine, I kind of like looked around the room. So I can see I have a sweater over there. Do sweaters have like a kind of distinct feeling to them that you think you could draw? Probably. What about like your hair? Right? Different people have different textures to their hair. My hair is kind of like, I don't know, I guess I would describe it as like a messy texture, unless I like flat iron it, which I do sometimes. So those are some ways that you could figure out types of textures that you could draw. Is either things from nature or just like look around the room that you're in and like see if you can find something where you would be able to describe what it feels like. So I think I like the idea of snakeskin. So here I'll write snakeskin. And then over here I will draw the texture of it. So So we know that, so probably fish scales would also be very similar. That might be, if you're a friend who goes fishing a lot, that might be a texture that you're more familiar with than snakeskin. So fish scales, pretty similar. So I'm gonna start drawing the texture of it. So I'm thinking about what lines I can use to kind of like show someone who's looking at my artwork what that would feel like. So I think of snakeskin as being very smooth, but made up of these kind of like little rough pieces that all kind of lock together, kind of like fish scales. So if I were to like touch my snake the other way, it would feel rough if I were to go against the like pointy pieces. But if I go this way, it would be nice and smooth. So I'm gonna make my snake skin. I'm gonna work on it. I'll probably speed this part up. There we go. So I sped that part up for us so we could see it a little bit faster. So I made my snake skin or my fish scales like texture where I can kind of imagine what this might feel like if I were to touch it. I can imagine that it would be smooth, smooth if I go this way and kind of rough if I went this way. So let's see, for my next texture, I think I'm gonna do a cactus. Some of you might have like little, I won't use the word pet, pet cactuses, like houseplant cactuses. So you might kind of know what a cactus feels like if you touch it. I'm gonna draw the top of my cactus. I have a cactus in my bathroom. I don't touch it though, because it would hurt me if I did. So what kind of a texture would you think a cactus would feel like? Probably pointy. I think pointy would be the word that I would use to describe cactus. The one that I have is kind of a round shape like this, and it has these little points that stick out in all different directions. So there. So now let's see, how about, I think for my last one I'll do bark, so tree bark. And you can do different ones that I am doing. So let's see. So this one, the last two I used line to make the texture. So we know that visual texture can be made using shape, line, value, other visual elements. For bark, I think I'm gonna use something called value. We used value here when we shaded in our sphere to make it look like a three-dimensional object. So I think, so value is different than line in that I'm not making like hard lines. I'm like coloring in essentially. So let's see. So some tree bark is very smooth. Like, I think I'll think about what a birch tree might look like. So I'm gonna put down a really light value to start with. And then if you think about, I'll insert a picture of what birch bark looks like. Sometimes it has these little like notches in it and these like little smooth lines that kind of go like in the opposite direction. So let's see. I might put in the little lines that I would see in birch bark. There you go. So I have 3 different textures. You can pick really simple things, like something that's smooth, like a rock, something that's rough, like a piece of sandpaper, right? What would sandpaper texture look like? I think of it as having all those little dots on it because it's little tiny pieces of sand that are glued down to a piece of paper, right? Try and choose 3 different types of textures and tell me the words of what they are, and then show me a picture of what their texture would look like. So here I have actual texture, right? If I had an actual snake, it would have a 3-dimensional texture. When I draw it with a picture, I have just a 2-dimensional visual representation of that texture. Okay, so when you are done with that, we will flip back to right here and we will write down our definition of texture. So you could do a picture or you could do words. It is up to you. I'm gonna do words for this one. Maybe I'll do words and a picture. So texture is a visual texture. We're really talking about visual texture. It is a representation of what something looks like it would feel like. So you could even write down texture words for me. Words like bumpy, words like smooth. Stuff like that works as well for this. Okay, my friends, so we have color, line, shape, form, and texture all done. If you don't have one of these sections done, you should go back to one of the previous weeks and do it. If you lost your packet somewhere along the way and needed a new one, like we know that I spilled stuff all over one of mine, so I don't have the color section done. If that happened to you, you did it at home, but you don't know where it is, just like have your parents write like did it but lost it or something like that on those papers, and I'll know that, or have them send me a note or something, and I'll know that you did it but just it didn't make it into me, and that's okay, as long as most of this packet is done. So then on the very last page, we have our rubric. So you are going to fill this out. This will be the last thing that you will do in this packet. So we know a 1 is like a does not meets, a 2 is a partially meets, a 3 is a meets. So my work is complete. So if I had actually skipped this section, right, I probably would not get to fill out the smiley face. But you know, if we look back at the video evidence, we will know that I did do it. So I will circle the like smiley face. You could also color these in if you wanted to, like, I don't know, have a blue face. My work has good craftsmanship. So that means that you did a good job making your work look neat and organized, and like your packet isn't like ripped up and stuff like that. So like, right, if I had like a part of my page ripped off, right? Ooh, that would probably make my work closer to a 2. If when I colored things in, I colored them in like this, that makes my work closer to a 2. If all of your work is like this, then you're the does not meet. And it's okay not to meet a target. That's why it's a target, right? It's something that you are aiming for. We don't always reach the things that we're aiming for, and that's okay. And the last thing is that I understand the concepts. So if you like have no idea what this packet was about, fill out the 1. If you understood some of what we did, fill out the 2. If you like understood all of it and feel like, you know, you could explain it back to me, you should fill out the 3. It's up to you where you put your smiley faces. This won't even necessarily, right? If you fill out a 2 on something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not gonna get a good grade in art. So don't, if you feel like you need to put a 2 for something, it's okay. Just put it, it's all right. Okay, so this packet, when you are done with it, should go into your backpack. And when you get it to school the next day, you need to give it to your classroom teacher and say, here is my art packet. If you, yeah, So we're gonna do something called texture rubbing. So this is what you need your crayons for. If I were you, I would go and look through your like craft box of stuff that you have at home and find older crayons. These crayons are pretty nice and new, but just my personal like way I treat crayons is that I don't care too much about what they look like. I don't care about having the paper on them. I don't care about having them like all back in the package. But some people really do. So if you have nice new crayons, you might want to find some older crayons because you will need to peel off the paper because we're not going to draw with like the edge of the crayon. We're going to rub with the side of the crayon. That's why it's a texture rubbing. So you will also need a piece of paper. So you should go outside and find something like a leaf, or look for something in your house that you think has an interesting texture and is relatively flat. So if here I have, this is like a, this thing is like a phone stand. It'll like suction to your desk and you can like put your phone in it. It has an interesting texture, but it's very three-dimensional, right? It would be really hard to make a texture rubbing with something like this, right? Like I can try. So what I would do is I would put my object down, put my paper on top of it, and then rub with my crayon. This is just too three-dimensional. It would not work. Even though it has an interesting texture, it is not a good choice. You want something that's relatively flat. I have these little paper doilies. They're kind of old-fashioned, but I like them. I can put something flat with a texture under my paper and rub with my crayon, and I will get to see the texture come through. So I can see the little like pattern that was in the doily come through to the piece of paper when I rub on top of it. Let's see, I also have these rubber stamps. These might be a little bit harder, but let's see if I can get them to work. Kind of. I can see a little bit of like the butterfly texture. Works a little bit. So something like this is better, I think. Something that's a little bit more flat. Something that I like to do sometimes is use two different crayons, two different colors of crayon. If you need help, because clearly I need help, if you need help peeling your crayons at home, you should ask your parents or baby sister, or babysitter, not baby sister. Oh my goodness. Don't ask your baby sister. She won't help you. See, that's super pretty. I think that's pretty. I think the bigger doily with like bigger spaces worked a little bit better than the small doily with the smaller spaces. Sometimes layering different things. So there I have my butterfly and my doily. It's pretty. So this isn't like necessarily making like a finished quality artwork, but it's just a nice way to experiment with different textures. Hey guys, so I rambled on slightly too long there, so I like just completely cut myself off. Just to sum up, what you should be doing when you are done with your packet is putting it in your backpack, giving it to your teacher when you get to school the next day. And for the little artwork part of today, you are just going to create a texture rubbing. You take a crayon, put it on its side, put something textured underneath a piece of paper, and rub on top of the paper. So like if this is my textured object, my piece of paper, I don't have any paper, my piece of paper goes on top of it, and then the crayon rubs on top of the paper. Don't put crayon on your object. You're putting object, paper, crayon on top. A lot of you have probably made leaf rubbings already this season. If you've done that already and don't want to do it again, you can just be like, yeah, I know how to do that. I kind of understand like the texture part of that. Then you're all good. You don't need to send me in the art projects that you made with your packet. What I need back from you is the packet itself with your name on it. Double check that your name is on that packet, because I have 250 students almost. So I am not going to be able to figure out whose it is if it does not have a name on it, and you won't get credit for it. So I want you to get credit for your hard work. So please put your name on your packet, send your packet into your teacher. You don't need to send me in the artworks, just the packet. if you have any other questions, send me an email or a message on Dojo. Thank you.